This video is about the characteristics of successful communication. So communication is one of the most important factors in communication is the context. So meaning that you're going to use different communications styles or methods, or you're going to communicate in different ways depending on the context or situation. So for instance, the knowledge and background of the individual you're communicating with. So for example, if I'm building a bridge, I'm a contractor, I'm a company that builds bridges, and I'm trying to convince the BC Department of Engineering, if there is one, the people that are in charge of bridges. So I'm going to be dealing with the engineering people there. They're going to want to know the details of the bridge, how we've tested it, what are the qualifications of my people that are building the bridge, qualifications of my engineers. They're going to want to look at all the stress diagrams and the calculations and all the detailed plans. Whereas if I'm communicating with a politician, politicians always want to get, or almost always want to get reelected. And so they care about the impact to their voters. And so if I'm talking to a politician, I'm going to talk about the benefits of this bridge, why this bridge is going to be better, why we can deliver on time and on budget, because taxpayers don't like it when things are late and over budget. So if we have a great track record of delivering on time, that's what I'm going to tell the politician and try to demonstrate that to him. The engineer does not particularly care about cost or delivering on time. They want a bridge that won't fall down. And then your relationship with the audience. So is it a friend? Is it your boss or subordinate? So with your friend, you can communicate very casually. You can be offensive. You can be inappropriate. You can be racist, whatever you want with your friends. And there's not going to be probably significant consequences because they know you. Whereas if you're dealing with your boss, you have to be respectful to your boss. They're not going to tolerate inappropriate communications. It's a formal relationship. He is your boss. And so you may get along with your boss, but he's always your boss, and there's a formal relationship there, and there are boundaries. And when you speak to a subordinate, you also have to be respectful to your subordinate, and you might, as you are with your boss, but you can be more forceful with your subordinates because they report to you, but you still can't be disrespectful. And so the communications in business have to be respectful, professional, and over the last 30 years, they've changed significantly. If I communicated in the style that I communicated and interacted with my coworkers 25 years ago, today, I'd likely get fired. So times have changed, and you have to respect what the current situations are in North America or whatever country you're working in with respect to how what's considered appropriate and not appropriate in the workplace, and that can vary drastically in countries. The external influences, so is the person stressed that you're trying to communicate with? Are they busy? Generally not a good idea to try to communicate with someone when you're stressed and busy. If you're going to ask for a raise from your boss, probably the best day is Friday. People tend to be in better moods or in good moods on Fridays. So the weekend's coming. They're looking forward to the weekend. We are usually in a better mood on a Friday than a Saturday, actually, because we anticipate the weekend. So Fridays are probably a good day to ask for a raise. Mondays, most people are not in a fantastic mood. In some employees have a very bad habit of, as soon as the boss walks in the door on Monday morning, they hit them with 10 different problems. And generally, bosses don't like that. People have a nice weekend. They got to start work. They want to start slowly, have a coffee, read a couple of emails, but they don't want to be jumped on first thing in the morning. And then depending on the urgency, you're going to choose the medium. So for instance, here in BC, we have a BC earthquake warning system. You want to make sure that that gets there very quickly. So you're going to use a text messaging system. Doesn't make sense to send people an email. Well, an email would be fairly instantaneous, but a letter which arrives 5 days later. So because you want an instant, text messaging is instantaneous. Email can get bogged down in servers, etc. So you select your medium based on the context. So you want to be effective, you want to keep all of these variables in mind. Successful communications, they should be strategic, professional, and adaptable. So there should be purpose to your communication. We don't just send out random emails, though sometimes we do get those from people or from companies, which we try to understand what the purpose of it was. But generally, there should be a purpose. It should be focused on the audience, the empathy, so understand their situation. It should be persuasive. If you're trying to persuade people to do things. You want them to attend a meeting. You want to approve funding, and then, as mentioned, it should be professional, appropriate, clear, concise. Most people don't want to read long emails. Emails in the business world is more of a task. This isn't like writing short stories. Most people don't enjoy reading emails. They want it to be extremely efficient. The more efficient your email, the better I'm going to appreciate it. And then the use of technology or being adaptable. So depending on the culture, for example, some cultures are more formal. They would expect that you have a face-to-face meeting in your office or their office. Even that is a cultural, whose office do you meet in, the senior person or the junior person? And the use of technology. Obama, in 2008, when he got elected, one of the reasons why he was successful in communicating or connecting with young people was that he used Twitter and social media to communicate with young people, and that's one of the reasons why he did so well. And Donald Trump, again, is adaptable, and he uses Twitter. Donald Trump has a poor relationship with journalists, and so to get his message out, he doesn't want to go through journalists because they're going to vet his message, and then if he says things that are factually incorrect, they're going to mention that in the article. So that his communications don't get watered down by journalists, he likes to deal directly and communicate using Twitter. That way it's not filtered. He can say what he wants, and there's no filtering on his messages. Recently, Twitter has, however, now tagged some of his messages saying that just to check the facts. But other than that, he has a direct line of communication with his base. And we also have to learn to be collaborative in new ways of working, and we're seeing that now. For example, using Zoom, we've adapted fairly quickly to teaching these remote courses. I'm not sure 15 years ago what we would have done. We wouldn't have Zoom, and we wouldn't have these online videos. We wouldn't have the backbone networks to be able to support video conferencing like we have now. That's an adaptation that we've all made fairly successfully. And an example, I talked about clear and concise communication. There's something that's called wiggle room. And politicians and business people often communicate in a way where there is wiggle room. In other words, they can wiggle out of it, like you would wiggle out of being tied up with rope. And that way, if they don't meet the targets or they don't achieve what they're going to said that they're going to achieve, they can rewrite the story. And for example, I worked with a company that said they were going to be number one in 5 years. Well, after 5 years, they weren't number one. And everybody interpreted number one to mean the largest company in that sector. When the 5th year came and they weren't number one, the CEO just claimed, well, when I said number one, I meant the number one preferred supplier. And I don't actually know what that means, but that was how he kind of wiggled out of it. Donald Trump, initially, if we go back, I think most of us would say when we thought of the wall, it was this big concrete thing that went from one end of the coast to the other between Mexico and the United States. And now you notice over time, how that has kind of changed and he's kind of wiggled where sometimes there won't be any wall. It'll be a technology wall, maybe with electronic surveillance. And then some of the wall will just be metal and standard fencing. So he has changed that over time, and he's created, he just spoke in general terms, calling it a wall. The other thing you need to do is take responsibility and apologize. So if you're wrong, say you're sorry. And what most bosses want to hear is, I'm sorry, and it won't happen again. And that's a very powerful statement. And sometimes we don't like to say that, but bosses need to know that you admit that you're wrong and you're going to fix things. It's not going to happen again. And it's a very good thing to learn in the business world. The other important factor in any communications is who has the position of power. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, extremely rich, powerful person, one of the most powerful people in the world. He controls a communication channel, Facebook, that hundreds of millions of people use. And he got called before Congress in the United States about exposing private information of users, of Facebook users, and not protecting their privacy rights. And he was described as contrite and apologetic. This is a part of his quote here, but he also said, we need to do better. So basically saying that won't happen again. And as a result of that, the Congress was quite forgiving of him. They didn't punish him. They didn't investigate Facebook. He said he was going to fix things. He was polite. He was respectful. And they basically slapped his wrist. Now, unfortunately, he screwed up a couple of months later. And now they're not so forgiving because he didn't fix what he said he was going to fix. And now Facebook is under government scrutiny, being investigated by the Justice Department and other states' attorney generals. So it would have worked, but he didn't follow through. And why he was contrite and apologetic, he learned from someone a little bit older than him, Bill Gates. So Bill Gates in 1998 was called before Congress. He would have been at that time still one of the richest guys in the world. Microsoft was a near monopoly, dominant. powerful. He was very powerful. And if you look at this picture, you can see he's not even looking at the congressmen or senators who are questioning him. He looks disrespectful. He was completely disrespectful of Congress, and didn't apologize for anything. They were investigating Microsoft for anti-competitive behavior, and as a result, Microsoft spent probably the next 10 years or around that amount of time being investigated by the Justice Department, and them clamping down on the activities of Microsoft. And it's estimated that Microsoft lost hundreds of billions of dollars in possible market value by his attitude to Congress, who has an immense amount of power. Both of these guys are very powerful, but the United States government is much more powerful than either one of these companies. And they've learned, certainly Bill Gates learned that the hard way, and cost shareholders of Microsoft hundreds of billions of dollars. Another guy who that you may know is Elon Musk from Tesla. So he is not very respectful of government either. He disrespected the Securities Exchange Commission, which is the market regulator. He criticized them, was disrespectful to them when they were investigating him for some activities relating to him tweeting information about Tesla. So the Securities Exchange Commission regulates communications that may impact share prices. So he was completely disrespectful, and as a result, they ended up fining him $40 million, or he personally paid $20 million, and Tesla paid the other $20 million. But even more humiliating was that they appointed 2 independent directors to his board of directors, they removed him as the chair of the board, and also 2 independent directors were appointed. But these independent directors now have to review his tweets before he sends them out, any tweets relating to Tesla. So somewhat humiliating for him as a guy who founded the company, who runs the company, but he has to check in with his board of directors before he can send out tweets. So you always want to keep in mind who's powerful. These are some of the most powerful people in North America, but they got on the wrong side of the government, and they paid for it. And I think that's the end of this section.